Want my baby back to me. Got nothing but
Damn right!
Damn right! Got the blues. More blues on our Facebook and Twitter.
More with this week's special guest when Blues America returns. But first, the Blues Break, big number 1. With a new release from Alligator Records, it's Tommy Castro with Common Ground from PRX, Public Radio Exchange.
The Blues Break. Blues Break. Big number 1. Number 1.
Everybody's just looking for the same thing. I'm a lot like you. You're a lot like me. A little piece of mind, enough to eat. We wanna stand on our own 2 feet. I don't know much, but this I do believe. We got to stand together on common ground. We got to band together or we all fall down. Everybody looking for someone to blame. We're not as different as we are the same. We got to stand together on common ground. Everybody knows that we got to change things, but all we seem to do fuss and fight. Left, right, black or white, we all dream about the same things tonight. Let's wake up, people, it's time to build a brand new day. We gotta stand together on common ground. We got to band together or we all fall down. Everybody looking for someone to blame. We're not as different as we are the same. We got to stand together on common ground. Come on, stop throwing stones. Come on, you know you're not alone. Come on, we got to get together. We're just about to lose our only home. Stand together on common ground. We got to band together or we all fall down. Everybody looking for someone to blame. We're not as different as we are the same. We got to stand together on common ground. Stand together on common ground. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Stand together on common ground. Reach out your hand now. Stand together on common ground. Everybody get together.
Wait a minute, Big Mama. Blues America will be right back.
Blues America is supported by Record High Vinyl Store in Phoenix, the place for serious music fans and vinyl collectors to find large quantities of first pressings, limited editions, box sets, audiophile, and vintage catalog, including blues, soul, jazz. They buy, sell, and trade, and offer vinyl cleaning and flattening service. Visit the store, located at 4242 East University Drive in Phoenix, or for more online at recordhighinphoenix.com. Like them on Facebook. Record High in Phoenix. Experience one of the last great record stores.
If you own a gun, you have a full-time responsibility. When you aren't using it, be sure it can't get into the hands of curious children, troubled teenagers, a thief, or anyone else who might misuse it. Your family, friends, and neighbors are all counting on you. Remember, always, lock it up. For more information on firearm storage safety, visit ncpc.org. This message brought to you by the National Crime Prevention Council, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and the Ad Council.
Blues America is supported by the Rhythm Room. The world-famous and historical Rhythm Room Concert Club is Arizona's premier blues hotspot, hosting nightly live music. Located at 1019 East Indian School Road in Phoenix and online at www.rhythmroom.com.
Damn right we got the blues. Blues America. Right now.
Bum, bum. Do, 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 do.
Blues America is supported by the Southwest Musical Arts Foundation.
I proved I really love you.
Do. Hiya. If you just turned this thing on, let me tell you what you're doing. You're listening to Blues America. I'm your host, Drew Verbis, and I'm hanging out at the Chico Chisholm Memorial Studio in Phoenix at 4242 East University Drive, live with today's special guests, authors Steve Bergsman and R. Gary Patterson. We're talking about the bizarre death of Johnny Ace, a perfect story for the Halloween weekend. If you miss anything, that's okay. Just press rewind on the streaming media feed, online now at bluesamerica.com, iTunes, or PRX. I'd like to say thank you to Don and the staff at CJMP 90.1 FM in British Columbia, Canada. Look for those t-shirts in the mail, Don. And shout out to bluesman Neil Barnes in the Bay Area. Thanks for supporting Blues America from PRX, Public Radio Exchange. Gary, before the break, you heard Steve's alternate theory about the death of Johnny Ace. I think he might be onto something. Don Roby had a reputation as a mobster. Maybe Johnny's death wasn't a crude mob hit, but perhaps did involve, disputed contract negotiations, as Steve suggests. What do you think about this? Was the mob somehow involved?
Well, let's go back and look at rock and roll history, and let's find out how much the mob was available in record labels. I mean, in New York, there were a number of labels that were controlled by organized crime. And when I think about Houston, and I think about his death there, it brings me to mind of Bobby Fuller. Because Bobby Fuller came out of El Paso, he was devoted to Buddy Holly. It was recorded in Clovis, New Mexico by Norman Petty. He moves out to Los Angeles. He does a cut of I Thought the Law and the Law Won. And when they found his body after leaving his mother at 1 o'clock in the morning, he had been badly beaten, doused in gasoline, and gasoline was down his throat. And they said that he'd committed suicide. You can't drink gasoline and commit suicide. You automatically regurgitate it. So a broken index finger on his left hand, as a guitar player, he wouldn't do that. Badly beaten, bruised chest and face. So the story goes that Bobby Fuller's death was a mob hit from Houston because he was dating a girlfriend who also was dating one of the mob bosses. So when I think of Houston, and I think of Bobby Fuller, and I think of the city, and I think of the label, and I think of Roby, and I think of Johnny Ace, I can see where organized crime would come in or a mob hit, especially if they had a huge life insurance policy. Now, I haven't seen anything to suggest that Roby had a life insurance policy on Johnny Ace, but he made millions off his songs. Like you said, Pledge of My Love was number one, and it was probably bought because a white audience was warming up to the idea of Johnny Ace. I mean, think of the year. He died in 1954. The first thing that goes through my mind, Elvis Presley records his first song in 1954. Did he model a lot of his vocal style, his romantic side of his singing, off Johnny Ace? Of course he did. And he actually cut Pledging My Love as one of his last cuts, which might have been a little Johnny Ace curse for him, because he did put that out on his last album. But when I think of Bob Dylan doing, Johnny Ace and all that, it's just amazing how his influence lived and how it supported so many different artists. Also in 1954, when I think of Johnny Ace, I think of James Dean. James Dean's motto, live fast, die young, leave a good-looking corpse, that followed Johnny Ace. He lived fast, he died young, and probably left a halfway decent-looking corpse when he killed himself. He was handsome with a smile. How many people attended his funeral? The church, I think, held 2,000. They had 5,000 show up, maybe 10. And he sold all these albums, and he was probably more popular in death, which is like James Dean after Rubble Without a Cause. And James Dean died, in 1955. And he was a year younger than Johnny Ace. So when I think of those, I think about how they fit together in tragedy. The only problem was Johnny Ace still not had his due as well as James Dean. And James Dean had, 3 films? So when we take a look at that, at the time period, it was right on the cusp of rock and roll. It was before Little Richard. Elvis had done the song for his mother. And if Johnny Ace had lived several more years, I think he would have been better known.
My baby loved me in the morning, loved me all night too.
You're looking back through music history, and Otis Redding, he died tragically, but he's still very well known. Marvin Gaye was killed by his father; he's still very well known. Robert Johnson started the 27-year-old curse. He's still more popular than ever. Why in the heck doesn't anybody remember Johnny Ace?
For a couple of reasons. These are important reasons. So in the 1950s, just before the growth of rock and roll, the recording charts were truly segregated. So you had you really had the white world and you had the black world on the record chart, and they up until they really didn't cross over. There were a couple of acts that crossed over. Nat King Cole, a few others like that. They may have crossed over, but it was a different world then. So Johnny Ace, he was the top on the rhythm and blues charts, but nobody knew of him on the pop charts. So again, it was a different world, so people didn't remember him. Now, guys like Robert Johnson, these were already legendary times. These founded sort of the roots of blues, but they weren't so much. People remembered their recordings, these early recordings they made, and it wasn't so much the airplay. Johnny Ace now it's the 1950s, and it wasn't so much the recordings that made him great. He was on the radio, and he was on the urban stations, the R&B stations. So it was a lost world, you might say. So even when he died, and 5,000 people show up at his funeral, and he was probably the most famous singer, nobody covered it. It was uncovered, you might say.
Well, when you mentioned Robert Johnson, you're talking about someone who was a very obscure artist who was picked up in England by Eric Clapton and Keith Richards and Jimmy Page. And what did it? It was the legend, all right? And we discovered Johnny Ace mainly because of what happened on Christmas night when he took that gun and he shot himself. Because you hear the story and then you go back and you listen to his music. Because it's interesting. Oh my gosh, what happened? What kind of life was that? With Robert Johnson, did he really sell his soul to the devil on Highway 61 and Highway 39? I mean,